The Race, written by Joe Slade, illustrated by Philip Newsome. It was the day of the big race. There were 3 runners in the race: the rabbit, the raccoon, and the turtle. "Here are the rules for the race," said the rat to the runners. "Relax while I explain the rules. Run up the rocky road to the big redwood tree. Run around the tree 3 times. Next, run along the river to the reservoir, where you'll find a rubber raft. Row the raft across the reservoir to the restaurant. Run right past the restaurant to Farmer Richard's rhubarb field. From the rhubarb field, return to the restaurant. Then row your rubber raft back to this side of the reservoir. Reverse your steps along the river to the big redwood tree. Rest there until you recover your breath, and then run back here to the red ribbon. The first one to return will claim the reward. The prize is a wonderful dinner. There will be raw radishes and ravioli with wild rice, followed by raspberries, raisins, and root beer," explained the rat. "Are you ready?" asked the rat. "We're ready to run," said the rabbit, raccoon, and turtle. "Ready, set, go!" They were off and running. The rabbit rushed into the lead, with the raccoon close behind. In the rear, the turtle rambled along at a relaxed pace. The rabbit reached the reservoir, and the raccoon ran along the riverside, but the turtle had still not reached the redwood tree. The rabbit rowed his rubber raft across the reservoir to the restaurant. At the restaurant, the rabbit saw lots of juicy carrots and lettuce in the rubbish. "All this good food will rot. I'll stop and eat it. I'm so far ahead in the race that I don't have to rush. The others will never catch up." The rabbit ate so many carrots and so much salad that he had to rest to recover. While he was napping, the raccoon rowed across the river in her rubber raft and ran right past the restaurant to Farmer Richard's rhubarb field. Rhubarb was the raccoon's favorite food. When the raccoon saw the juicy rhubarb, she said to herself, "I'll stop and eat some rhubarb. I don't have to rush. The rabbit is sleeping, and the turtle will never catch up." The raccoon ate so much rhubarb that she had to rest to recover. While the rabbit and raccoon were napping, the turtle slowly made her way over the reservoir, past the sleeping rabbit, to the rhubarb field, and quietly past the resting raccoon. She reversed her steps and slowly broke through the red ribbon at the finish line. She happily shared her reward of raw radishes and ravioli with wild rice, raspberries, raisins, and root beer with the rat and her other friends. Sharon's Shoes, written by Ned Jensen and Elizabeth Austin, illustrated by Joel Snyder. Sharon Sherman lived in a small shack near the seashore. Sharon loved shoes. She had a huge stash of shoes of every shape and size. She had shabby shoes and shiny shoes. She had shaggy shoes and shimmering shoes. She had shoes with fish on them and shoes with shells on them. Every morning, Sharon took hours to pick a pair of shoes to wear. Each day, she put on a huge shoulder bag to go out and shop for more shapely shoes. At the shoe shop, she shoveled shoes into her shoulder bag. She brought them back to her shack near the shore. She stashed them on the shelf. She shoved them in the washer. She pushed so many shoes into the shack that she could not shut the door. She bought a shed and shoved more shoes in there. Soon the shed shuddered from all the shoes she shoved in. Sharon did not know what to do with all of her shoes. She shingled her shack and shed with shoes. She used shoes for dishes. She sharpened some shoes and used them as fishhooks. Still, Sharon had more shoes than she knew what to do with. One day, a sheik came to Sharon's seashore looking for shapely, shiny shoes. Upon seeing Sharon's stash of shoes, he said, "I have a stash of cash I wish to give you for your shoes. I shall take them all." The sheik showed Sharon his stash of cash. Sharon was so shocked she began to shake. "Cash for my stash of shoes?" she shouted as she shook. "That sure is a lot of cash, but you live across the sea. How will you send the shoes across the shark-filled sea?" "I shall take them in my royal ship," he answered. "What would a sheik like you do with all these shoes?" Sharon asked. "I wish to give them to the poor children across the sea. Their shoes are nothing but shreds. They must shuffle through piles of trash in their bare feet." Sharon felt ashamed that she had such a stash of shoes while the sheik's poor people had none. "I should not take your cash," said Sharon. "I wish to give you my shoes for free." "You have showered my people with goodness," shouted the sheik. "We will build a shrine to you in the shade of our wishing tree, for you have made our wishes come true." The next day, the sheik's ship pulled up to the seashore. The sheik's men began to shovel the shoes onto the ship. Soon, all the shoes had vanished, and the sheik's ship sailed happily away. Sharon went back to her shack near the shore. She did miss her shoes a little, but then she would think of her shrine in the shade of the wishing tree, and she was happy.
A Super Special Soup. Written by Joe Slade. Illustrated by A. Spencer. There's no school tomorrow since it's Saturday. You can come to my house for supper. My dad will make a stew. He'll make his super spicy special secret soup. He'll stir in all sorts of stuff. Sweet stuff, sticky stuff, smelly stuff, and super stinky stuff. He'll stick all this stuff in a super-sized saucepan and simmer it slowly until it smells so strong that one sniff will make you sneeze. He'll start with steaming hot, salty chicken stock. Then he'll sprinkle in 6 scoops of scrambled slugs. He'll stir for 60 seconds and add 7 squashed snails. If the soup seems to be sour, he'll make it sweet by adding 6 spoonfuls of sugar and 7 spoonfuls of maple syrup. 16 slices of salami and 17 slices of spicy Spanish sausage will go in next. The stew will now be sticky and sweet. Next to go into the saucepan will be 66 slices of slimy snake and 77 slippery squid. Doesn't this sound like a super snack? 7 cans of Swedish sardines and 6 pounds of Scottish smoked salmon will then be added to the mix. Wouldn't you love to sample this soup? It will make your stomach so satisfied. I cannot stop. The soup will still need some special seasoning. A squirt of spider's spit will be slowly stirred in, followed by some squirrel sweat strained through my sister's smelly sock. I think I'd better stop. You're looking quite scared. This stupendous soup is just a silly story. Not a bit of it is true. On Saturday for supper, we're really having spaghetti and a small salad with sponge cake and soda. It's really quite safe.
The Think Fest Thief. Written by Dolores Kleinholtz. Illustrated by Tad Butler. The mystery in Mrs. Thorwald's classroom at Thurston Elementary began when 3rd grader Thelma Thorpe made a curious discovery. It was 3 days before the children were to present their Think Fest Thursday projects. For those who may not know what Think Fest Thursday is, the 3rd Thursday of each month, Mrs. Thorwald asks the children to bring in or make projects that begin with certain sounds. This month, it was items beginning with the th sound. Mrs. Thorwald, the 3 things I brought are ruined, Thelma said. The thimbles, thermos, and threads were fine this morning, but look at them now. Mrs. Thorwald adjusted the thick glasses on her nose and examined the 3 items carefully. That's curious, Thelma. It appears they've been thoroughly chewed, she said. Thelma ran her thumb over the thick, dried glue left on the thermos bottle. Most of the thimbles and sparkly things I glued on are gone, Thelma said. I think this is a terrible thing to happen before ThinkFest Thursday. Just then, Theo Thatcher ran into the classroom, waving 3 thin pipe cleaners and torn brown paper. Mrs. Thorwald, this is all that's left of my ThinkFest Thursday thermometer. I found it beside the empty art supply cupboard. Thelma and Mrs. Thorwald raised their eyebrows. The art cupboard is empty? Mrs. Thorwald asked. That's very odd. I filled those shelves this morning with macaroni, thimbles, thread, and other supplies. They looked at Theo, holding the ragged paper that had been a 3-foot-long thermometer. Theo, Thelma, this is the work of a thief, Mrs. Thorwald said. I think we have a mystery that we need to solve before Thursday. They thought hard until they came up with a plan to catch the thief. The next day, Theo and Thelma stayed after school to help Mrs. Thorwald with their plan to catch the ThinkFest thief, for that's what they decided to call the thief. Theo laid a thin trail of macaroni from the art cupboard to the 3rd grade classroom. Thelma sprinkled gold glitter thickly on the floor at the door's threshold. We'll be able to follow their tracks when they step through the glitter, Thelma explained. Then Mrs. Thorwald dropped a trail of cookie crumbs from the glittery threshold to a cage under her desk. I think we're ready to catch the ThinkFest thief, Mrs. Thorwald said. They huddled in a darkened corner of the classroom and waited. As they tried to make themselves invisible, the thief tiptoed into the room. She sniffed the macaroni, then stepped through the gold glitter, leaving tiny footprints as she snooped around the classroom. Finally, following the cookie crumb trail, she thrust her body into the cage to nibble the cookie waiting there. Thump! Squeak! We caught the ThinkFest thief, Thelma and Theo shouted. They turned on the lights and hurried to the cage where they found a glittery gold mouse. I thought so, Mrs. Thorwald said with a grin. Don't feel threatened, little thief. We just want you to shop somewhere else. Thelma was curious. She followed the gold glitter footprints to a shabby box in a corner of the classroom. Theo, Mrs. Thorwald, look at this, Thelma shouted. This is why the mouse turned into a thief. There, nestled warmly in the shredded brown paper, thread, thimbles, and macaroni, slept 3 baby mice as big as your thumb. Theo, Thelma, and Mrs. Thorwald carried the caged mouse and her sleeping babies outside. At the far end of the playground, they settled the little nest deep inside a thorny thicket. Then as they set the caged mouse free to join her family, Theo, Thelma, and Mrs. Thorwald said, "Goodbye, little mouse. This is your new home."
Tom and the Egg. Written by Joe Slade. Illustrated by Philip Newsome. On a foggy October morning, Tom was jogging on a long path in Farmer Oliver's orchard. He was jogging with his dog, Bobby. Suddenly, Bobby stopped jogging. Tom did not want to stop. "What is the matter, Bobby? Are you hot?" asked Tom. That did not seem to be the problem. Tom jogged back to get Bobby. The dog was on top of a log, sniffing at something in a pile of moss under an olive tree. "What did you find, Bobby?" said Tom. When Tom saw what Bobby had found, he was shocked. It was the biggest egg he had ever seen. It was twice as big as a soccer ball. "It is a dinosaur egg," whispered Tom. "I must save it. There is no mom." Tom found a big box that was used to pack oranges. He filled the box with moss and carefully placed the egg on top of the moss. When he got home, Tom put the orange box, with the egg inside, in his dad's office. "Dad's gone to see his boss in Oregon for a few days. The egg will be safe, locked in Dad's office," thought Tom. He put a lot of his dad's socks on top of the egg to keep it warm. The next day, he told his friend Polly about the egg. "I have a dinosaur egg in my dad's office, and when it hatches, I'll be the only kid in the world with a dino pet," bragged Tom. "It will be a very hard job to raise a dinosaur baby," said Polly. "If it's a carnivore, you'll have to feed it a lot of meat. Where will you get the meat? They don't sell dino meat in the pet store. If it's an herbivore, you'll have to feed it a lot of vegetables. You'll need pots and pots of veggies," said Polly. "And the dino will not be housebroken, so you'll have to mop up lots and lots of plops," she added. Tom looked worried. He hadn't thought of how difficult a job it was to look after a dinosaur. When Tom got home, he said hi to his mom and ran straight to his dad's office. He opened the box and pulled off his dad's socks. He saw cracks on the egg. "Oh no, the dinosaur is about to hatch," he said. The egg was cracking and creaking, and finally a little head popped out. Then a little creature hopped out of the egg onto the top of Tom's head. It wasn't a dinosaur after all. It was a baby ostrich. Tom ran to show his mom. Tom told his mom how he and Bobby had found the egg in the orchard. Tom's mom laughed and told him how an ostrich that had escaped from the zoo had been caught in Oliver's orchard and taken back. But nobody knew she had laid an egg while she was away. The next day, Tom and his mom took the baby ostrich to the zoo. The mother ostrich was happy to see her baby. The zookeeper said that if Tom had not kept the egg warm, it would never have hatched. He was very happy, and he allowed Tom to pick a name for the baby. Tom thought for a moment and said, "I'd like to name her Olive, because I found the egg under an olive tree." "So it shall be," said the zookeeper. "Olive the ostrich." Toby the Tiger, written by Joe Slade, illustrated by A. Spencer. Two tiny tigers were born on the same day. It was a Tuesday. The tigers were twins. One tiny tiger was called Tony, and the other was called Toby. 10 months later, the tigers were no longer tiny. Tony was completely covered with stripes. They were orange and black stripes. Toby was different. Instead of stripes, he was completely covered with triangles. They were turquoise triangles. On Toby's fur was a pattern of turquoise triangles on a white background. There were triangles from the top of his head to the tip of his tail. "You're not a true tiger," the other tigers told Toby. "Tigers don't have turquoise triangles." Toby was terribly sad. He knew he was truly a tiger. Tony, his twin, was also sad. He didn't like the other tigers teasing Toby. "Don't take any notice of them," said Tony. "You are a true tiger. You're just different. You have a different type of fur, that's all." "I don't want to be different," said Toby. "I want to be the same as the other tigers." Time passed. Tony and Toby became 2 years old. Toby remained the same. He was still covered with turquoise triangles. The other tigers no longer teased Toby. Toby had big, sharp teeth. None of the tigers wanted to be bitten by Toby's sharp teeth. Toby was still unhappy. The other tigers didn't talk to Toby because he was different. He was still totally covered with turquoise triangles. One day, Toby was walking alone in the jungle. He heard some noise in the trees ahead of him. He quietly tiptoed through the undergrowth. When he looked through the leaves, he saw that Tark, the leader of the tigers, was trapped by a group of hunters. Tark was in terrible trouble. Toby had to try to rescue him. There was no time to get help. Toby took a little time to think. There were too many hunters for him to just charge in. He needed to trick the men. He had a plan. Toby took some long, tough vines and twisted one end around a big tree. He trailed the other end to another big tree 20 meters away. He pulled the vine tight and tied it to the trunk of the tree. The hunters and Tark were on one side of Toby's trap. On the other side was a steep bank leading down to a river. Toby then circled around to the other side of the hunters. He took a deep breath, let out the most terrifying roar, and charged at the hunters. All the hunters saw was huge, sharp teeth and a flash of turquoise and white. They all ran as fast as they could toward Toby's trap. Toby's plan worked perfectly. All 6 hunters tripped over the trap and tumbled down the bank toward the river. One by one, they splashed into the cold water. Toby quickly untied Tark, and they both ran through the jungle and back to their home. When they got back, Tark wasted no time in telling the tigers about Toby's bravery. "Today I was rescued by a very clever and brave tiger," said Tark. "I also want to tell you that many years ago, before any of us were born, there was a leader of the tigers called Tobias. He was the bravest and cleverest tiger that ever lived. Tobias was the only tiger ever to have turquoise triangles on his fur instead of orange and black stripes. Tobias was special, and now we have another special tiger in Toby. From that day on, Toby was very popular with all the other tigers. Tony said to Toby, "You see, it really matters who you are and what you do, not what you look like."
Two Crazy Zebras. Written by Joe Slade. Illustrated by Joel Snyder. There's a crazy zebra at the zoo. In fact, there's not just one, but two. One has zigzags down his back. The fuzzy one, his name is Zach. Those aren't real zebras, some would say. They're tired and lazy. There's just no way. Look at their size. They're much too small. They just eat bananas. They don't graze at all. Zebras from Zanzibar, the zoo sign says. The older one's Zach, the other one's Des. I have to prove that the zebras are fakes. I'll stay here all day if that's what it takes. As soon as it opens, I go to the zoo. I gaze at the zebras to see what they'll do. The zoo zebra zone is next to the maze. Grass all around, but not once do they graze. I've got my camera. It has a zoom lens. I climb up a tree to hide from my friends. I wait and I wait, but there's nothing to see, except for the flies that buzz around me. Now it's late, and the zoo needs to close. I'm getting so tired that I almost doze. The lions are roaring for big chunks of meat. Elephants trumpet. They're ready to eat. The zookeeper calls both zebras out. They run to him. Wait, what's this about? He reaches to Des and opens a zipper. His zigzags split open, and out jumps Nipper. Nipper's a chimp that lives in the zoo. The zookeeper unzips Zach's suit, too. Out jumps a chimp whose name is Slash. I take a photo and off goes the flash. "Oh no," yells the zookeeper, "our secret is out." "We couldn't buy zebras," he says with a shout. People love zebras, of that there's no doubt. The chimps were only too glad to help out. Both chimps come up to me for a nuzzle. I am quite happy I've solved the puzzle. Don't worry, your secret is safe with me. I'll even wear your zebra suit for free.
The Ugly Umbrella, written by Joe Slade, illustrated by Tad Butler. It was sunny when Buddy went to Cub Scouts at the clubhouse. The Cubs had a lot of fun until it was time to go home for lunch. When they looked outside, the sun had gone and it was pouring rain. Everyone hurried to the umbrella stand to grab an umbrella. None of the Cubs wanted to be left with the big, ugly umbrella. Buddy was finishing a cup of water, so he didn't run to the umbrella stand with everyone else. Buddy knew that he'd be the unlucky one who had to take the unpopular, ugly umbrella, but he'd have to use it because he didn't want to get wet. He tucked the umbrella under his arm and went outside. As soon as Buddy opened up the ugly umbrella, a gust of wind suddenly blew under the umbrella and took Buddy up into the air. Buddy's friend, Dustin, grabbed Buddy's legs to pull him back down, but his jeans came off in Dustin's hands. Buddy was left in his underpants, and the umbrella continued to take him up and up, higher and higher. Buddy was scared, but he couldn't let go of the umbrella because he was too high up in the sky. Buddy looked down and saw his uncle's house way underneath him. He understood it was urgent that he do something quickly. Buddy had an idea. He pulled out his Cub Scout pocket knife and cut into the ugly umbrella. Suddenly, he was falling through the air. He was upside down, tangled in the broken umbrella. He splashed to earth with a bump, and then, unfortunately, he tumbled into his uncle's duck pond. He was wet, cold, muddy, and very upset. It was all the fault of the ugly umbrella. Buddy's uncle helped him out of the muddy duck pond and took him into his house. Buddy was soon sitting on a furry rug, with a mug of hot milk and a big sticky bun on the table in front of him. "Don't be unhappy," said Buddy's uncle. "Now none of the Cubs will have to take the big ugly umbrella ever again."
Vince and Vicky's Adventure. Written by Joe Slade. Illustrated by Tad Butler. Vince and Vicky Valdez were on vacation with their parents in a small village by the sea. The village was in a green valley that had fruit and vegetables growing in fields. Vince and Vicky played volleyball on the beach and were having the very best time until a visitor came to their hut. The visitor said he lived in the village. He was vice chief of the village, and he had come to ask a favor. The vice chief went on to tell his story. Last week, 5 village children vanished. They just vanished without a trace. Everyone was very worried. And then yesterday, our chief had a vision. He was taking a nap after devouring a very large bowl of vanilla ice cream. In his vision, he saw the 5 missing village children in a cave under the volcano. A big, violent dragon had captured them. 12 vicious vampire bats and 12 vultures were guarding the cave. Then a beautiful young woman said in a soft voice, "The only way to free the children is to play beautiful music to the dragon. The dragon will fall asleep. the more beautiful the music, the more soundly he will sleep. The vision then disappeared. We have asked all the villagers if they can play beautiful music. Unfortunately, no one can. One of the villagers said she heard beautiful music coming from your hut last night. So I am here to ask you, Mr. Valdez, to volunteer to voyage to the volcano and play your beautiful music. The 5 village children then can be freed from the dragon. That wasn't me playing the music, explained Mr. Valdez. It was my children. Vince plays the violin and Vicky plays the viola. I'm sorry, but I can't send my children to face a violent dragon. Although Mr. Valdez didn't believe in dragons, he thought it would be dangerous to let his children go near the volcano. It will be quite safe, said the vice chief. They can stay inside the chief's van. The chief's van is a very fast vehicle. If the dragon comes, the van can speed away. Yes, let's go, Dad. It will be exciting to see a dragon, pleaded Vince. Mrs. Valdez knew that the volcano hadn't erupted for 5 years, and she didn't believe in dragons. She said, "Let them go. It will be an adventure for them." "Okay," said Mr. Valdez. "When do they leave?" "We'll pick them up at daybreak tomorrow," answered the delighted vice chief. The chief's van arrived very early the next morning. Vince and Vicky jumped into the van. The chief was driving and the vice chief was in the passenger seat. The chief told them that they were very brave and thanked them for volunteering. Then they all sped off toward the volcano. Vince and Vicky were very scared when they arrived at the volcano. They didn't know what to expect. Everyone jumped out of the van. Vince carried his violin, and Vicky carried her viola. They followed the chief, who was looking for the place he had seen in his vision. After looking around for a few minutes, the chief said, "Ah, there it is." He was pointing to the entrance to a cave, but a pile of rocks blocked the entrance. The chief asked the children to start playing their violin and viola at the entrance to the cave. They played beautifully, but nothing happened. "Louder, louder," shouted the chief. The children played as loudly as they could. Gradually, the rocks blocking the entrance to the cave began to move. First, little stones trickled down, but then big rocks started to fall from the cave entrance. The children almost stopped playing when they saw a group of vultures fly out of the cave. The chief encouraged them to play on. Then a group of vampire bats flew out of the cave. The chief asked them to play still louder. When all the rocks had rolled away from the cave entrance, 5 little children ran out toward the chief. He hugged each of them in turn. Everyone was very happy. Vince and Vicky carried on playing the violin and viola. "We must all run back to the van before the dragon wakes up," said the chief. "What dragon?" asked one of the children. "The dragon that captured you, of course," answered the chief. "We didn't get captured. We were playing in the cave when all those rocks came down and blocked the entrance. It was dark inside, so we couldn't see any dragons. You were very lucky that it was too dark for the dragon to see you," said the chief. Vince and Vicky looked at each other and smiled. They didn't get to see the dragon, but they were pleased that they had helped find the missing children. We Need a Vacation. Written by Dolores Kleinholz, illustrated by Joel Snyder. The Sweetheart Bakery on Green Street made delicious pastries and treats. The three owners, Millie, Tilly, and Josephine, were always busy making gooey peanut bars, honey buns, toffee coffee cakes, creamy cheesecakes, and many fancy treats fit for a queen. They were as busy as bees, hardly stopping to eat or sleep. But after one really long day, the work caught up with Millie, Tilly, and Josephine. Millie began to feel weak after making pastries all day. "Enough. I'm ready to relax," said Millie. "I'm dreaming of sleeping in a lovely treehouse by a stream." "My back is creaking from the sweeping I do each day," said Tilly, leaning on her broom. "I'm dreaming of sitting on the beach and reading for hours." "And, if you please, I'm very tired of kneading dough," said Josephine. "I'm dreaming of putting my feet up, eating peanuts, and seeing all my favorite movies on TV. Maybe we need a complete rest from our bakery business. We'll each take a vacation." So Millie, Tilly, and Josephine agreed to close the Sweetheart Bakery for a week. "See you next week," they squealed happily. They each set off down Green Street. But after 2 nights in a drafty treehouse, Millie had 15 mosquito bites. "These pesky mosquitoes! There are no window screens. The stream is too noisy, and I can't sleep with the moonlight peeking in," she complained. "I'm ready to leave." So Millie sneaked back to the Sweetheart Bakery and quietly began making peach pies in the kitchen. "Now I feel relaxed," she said. Indeed, that was enough vacation for me. After 2 days at the beach, Tilly was completely bored with the breeze blowing sand everywhere and the hot sun beating down. "I can't read in this heat. I miss keeping the bakery neat with the easy sweep of my broom," she complained. "I'm ready to leave." So Tilly sneaked back to the Sweetheart Bakery and quietly began sweeping. "Now I feel relaxed," she said. Indeed, That was enough vacation for me. And what about Josephine? After 2 days of eating salty peanuts and watching movies, Josephine sat knee-deep in a heap of peanut shells. "I've seen these movies a zillion times," she complained. "I'd rather be kneading dough for my tasty wheat bread. I'm ready to leave." So Josephine sneaked back to the Sweetheart Bakery's pantry. She tore open a sack of wheat flour with a loud rip. "Who's there?" screamed Millie and Tilly. Startled to see each other working instead of relaxing, they squealed with laughter, tears streaming from their eyes. Indeed, that was enough vacation for us, they agreed. Now let's get busy.